What if the commute everyone told you was backward gave you more control than the system held up as the smarter alternative? In Britain, one delay can swallow the next connection. In America, a highway jam may slow you down, yet the road often keeps giving you choices. So which system actually respects your time more? The answer gets uncomfortable fast because once you compare reliability, flexibility, and everyday freedom, no contest starts sounding less like clickbait and more like a confession. Freedom has four wheels. A British departure board can change the mood of an entire morning with one tiny word, while an American highway usually asks a much simpler question: are you ready to leave yet? That difference sounds small until you build a normal working day around it. In Britain, especially around cities such as London, Manchester, Birmingham, and Leeds, public transport is deeply woven into everyday life. Trains, buses, and connecting services can be convenient when everything lines up properly, but the passenger is still moving according to somebody else's timetable. Once a delay enters the picture, that neat schedule can unravel surprisingly fast. America approaches movement from almost the opposite direction, and this is where many European assumptions about the country begin to look incomplete. American car culture is often presented overseas as excessive, wasteful, or hopelessly dependent on highways. What gets far less attention is the practical freedom hiding inside that system. Across huge parts of the United States, the road does not tell you when you may travel. Your own schedule does. You leave after breakfast, before sunrise, after work, or 10 minutes late because somebody could not find their keys. The interstate does not close the gate because you missed the 817. That sounds almost comically ordinary to Americans, which is precisely why it matters. In Britain, a delayed train can affect the bus waiting at the other end, the next connection, the meeting after that, and eventually the entire shape of the day. The original problem might be 15 minutes, yet the inconvenience spreads like somebody tipped a row of dominoes across the timetable. Driving in America comes with its own frustrations, of course. Houston, Atlanta, Los Angeles, and Washington can all produce traffic that makes a dashboard clock feel personally insulting. But a traffic jam and a canceled connection are very different kinds of inconvenience. One slows your journey. The other can remove part of the journey altogether. There is also something culturally revealing about how Americans treat distance. A 40-mile drive can be discussed with the same emotional intensity as going to Target for paper towels. The car is waiting outside, the luggage goes in the trunk, the temperature is whatever the air conditioner says it is, and the route can change. The second traffic builds ahead. That combination of privacy, flexibility, storage, climate control, and personal timing is difficult to appreciate fully until daily movement has depended on platforms, transfers, and service announcements. Britain's public transport remains valuable, particularly inside dense urban areas where rail and buses can move enormous numbers of people efficiently. Yet the American highway system offers a kind of everyday independence that is easy to underestimate from across the Atlantic. It turns travel from an appointment into a decision. And once that difference becomes obvious, the oversized American freeway suddenly looks less like an obsession with cars and more like a giant piece of infrastructure built around one very American idea. When you are ready to go, the road is already there. America has Plan B. The cleverest thing about an American highway may be the road you never planned to take. That sounds strange until traffic suddenly turns red on the navigation screen, and within seconds, the route redraws itself through another interchange, a frontage road, a parallel highway, or a completely different side of town. The destination stays the same, only the path changes. In Britain, a disrupted railway corridor can be far less forgiving because trains cannot casually leave the tracks, make a right at the next light, and reappear 20 miles later as though nothing happened. This is where the American road system starts showing off without really trying. The US interstate highway system stretches for roughly 49,000 miles, according to Federal Highway Administration figures, but its real advantage is not simply the mileage. Around major metropolitan areas, interstates connect with state highways, beltways, bypasses, frontage roads, and local arterial roads. Dallas-Fort Worth is a perfect example. I-35V, I-35W, I-30, I-20, I-635, and several tollways create a web of alternatives that can look like somebody dropped a bowl of spaghetti onto Google Maps. It may not win a beauty contest, but spaghetti has one useful quality. There is usually another strand. British rail works differently because its efficiency depends heavily on fixed corridors. London has an extraordinary public transport network, yet disruption on a major rail route can still funnel large numbers of passengers toward the same limited alternatives. Manchester, Birmingham, and Leeds face the same basic geometry. When signaling equipment, overhead wires, rolling stock, or a major junction develops a problem, travelers cannot simply invent another railway line beside it. That difference changes how disruption feels. American traffic can certainly be miserable. Nobody sitting motionless on Atlanta's I-285 at 5:15 p.m. is composing love letters to asphalt. Yet drivers often retain options while the problem unfolds. Google Maps can suggest another exit. Waze can send half the neighborhood through a road nobody remembered existed. A highway closure might add miles, but the transportation network often bends instead of snapping. That flexibility is surprisingly addictive because it gives inconvenience somewhere to go. A road network with multiple routes behaves a little like an American grocery store during Thanksgiving week. One checkout line may look hopeless, but there are 12 more over there. Somebody just opened the Register 7, and apparently self-checkout has joined the rescue mission. The experience is not always elegant, although the system keeps offering another move. Britain's railway network remains one of the country's great pieces of infrastructure, carrying huge numbers of passengers through compact cities where highways alone could never handle the demand. Yet when reliability becomes the question, America's enormous road web reveals an advantage that overseas criticism of car culture often misses. Redundancy is not glamorous, and nobody takes vacation photos beside exit 42B because it saved 23 minutes. But when one route stops working and another appears immediately, that boring-looking piece of concrete becomes incredibly lovable. America did not simply build roads between places. In many regions, it built choices between roads, and that may be one of the quiet reasons visitors begin understanding why Americans are so attached to the freedom of the highway. Door-to-door wins. The most underrated luxury in American transportation is not speed, horsepower, or a 6-lane interstate glowing under the sunset. It is the almost ridiculous pleasure of leaving one door and arriving at another without turning the journey into a relay race. That small detail completely changes how transportation feels. In Britain, public transit can look wonderfully efficient on a map because the lines connect neatly through London, Birmingham, Manchester, Glasgow, and other major cities. The map, however, does not carry your groceries. It does not walk you from home to the station, wait beside you on the platform, move your suitcase through a transfer, or explain why the bus you needed left 3 minutes before your train finally arrived. The timetable counts the scheduled journey. Real life counts every staircase, platform change, wet sidewalk, and awkward 15-minute gap in between. America removes much of that hidden friction by putting the entire trip inside one personal space. According to US Census Bureau estimates, roughly 9 out of 10 American households have access to at least one vehicle. That number helps explain why driving became more than a transportation choice in the United States. It became part of the architecture of daily life. Homes have driveways, workplaces have parking, grocery stores expect customers to load several bags at once, and suburban shopping areas are designed around the idea that people arrive carrying an entire little private room with them. That is the part overseas criticism of American car culture often skips. A trip from a suburb outside Dallas to a supermarket 10 miles away may involve walking 20 feet to the car, driving in climate-controlled comfort, parking beside the store, filling the trunk, and returning home without transferring anything more complicated than a bag of frozen chicken. Try recreating that same simplicity using 2 buses and a rail connection, and suddenly milk has become carry-on luggage. The cultural difference becomes especially obvious when errands pile up. Americans can combine Costco, Home Depot, a pharmacy stop, school pickup, and dinner into one continuous loop because the vehicle travels with them like a rolling base camp. The trunk quietly absorbs the day. British urban life often encourages smaller, more frequent trips because carrying capacity and transit connections shape what is practical. Neither habit appeared by accident. Britain grew around older, denser cities where rail and buses make enormous sense. Much of modern America expanded during the automobile age, giving highways, parking, and suburban development room to grow together. Yet once someone experiences the American version, its appeal becomes almost embarrassingly easy to understand. There is no timetable to memorize, no platform to hunt down, and no moment when 4 shopping bags suddenly feel like unpaid co-workers refusing to cooperate. The American highway system succeeds because it connects far more than cities. It connects the messy pieces of an ordinary day without asking people to unpack themselves between every stop. That may be why the car feels less like transportation in America and more like a key that happens to come with 4 wheels. Midnight still moves at 11:47 p.m., transportation stops being an engineering question and becomes a lifestyle test. During daylight hours, almost any system can look competent. Stations are staffed, trains arrive frequently, buses are still circulating, and there is usually another connection somewhere on the board. Late at night, the personality of a transportation network becomes much easier to see. Britain's cities remain well connected by European standards, yet many rail and bus services thin out sharply as the evening gets later. Even London, with one of the world's most famous transit networks, operates its night tube only on selected lines and mainly on Friday and Saturday nights. Outside the capital, the difference can feel even more obvious once normal daytime schedules wind down. The American highway has no equivalent of a last train. There is something wonderfully uncomplicated about that. Interstate 95 does not announce that tonight's final northbound departure has already left. I-10 does not ask Phoenix drivers to wait until morning. A highway may be busy, empty, under construction, or full of orange barrels that seem to reproduce after sunset, but the basic infrastructure remains available 24 hours a day. That changes far more than nightlife. America has millions of people working schedules that do not fit neatly between 9 and 5. Hospitals change shifts before sunrise. Warehouses keep moving overnight. Airports start filling long before most coffee shops open. Restaurant employees finish after traditional commuting hours, while truck drivers, maintenance crews, security workers, and countless service employees live on clocks that would make a normal railway timetable look slightly nervous. According to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, millions of Americans regularly work evening, night, rotating, or otherwise non-standard schedules. In a country operating across 6 primary time zones, and an economy that rarely shuts down completely, transportation that remains usable after midnight is not some roadside luxury. It becomes part of the machinery that keeps ordinary life functioning. This is where highway culture starts feeling strangely addictive. The freedom is almost boring until you lose it. Dinner runs late, so you leave at 12:20 instead of 10:30. Nobody checks a departure board. A family gathering stretches another hour because nobody's calculating the final connection home. The airport pickup arrives at 2 a.m., and the car simply heads onto the freeway as though Tuesday afternoon and Wednesday morning are equally legitimate times to exist. Americans may complain about driving, and they have earned that right after enough late-night construction zones. Yet there is a quiet confidence built into knowing that movement does not expire at midnight. In Britain, public transport is excellent at moving enormous numbers of people through dense urban corridors, particularly during the periods when demand is highest. But its timetable also shapes behavior. People learn when the last service leaves, how late they can stay, and what happens if they miss it. The clock becomes part of the journey before the journey has even started. American highways flip that relationship around. The traveler can decide when the evening ends. Perhaps that is why something as ordinary as a dark interstate, a glowing gas station sign, and an open road at 1:13 in the morning can feel unexpectedly luxurious to someone accustomed to checking the time before checking the distance. America's highways offer a peculiar kind of freedom that rarely appears in glossy travel brochures. Even when the city starts going to bed, the road still has the lights on. Weather can't cancel it. There's a very specific kind of British travel anxiety that begins with one sentence. Services may be affected by weather conditions. From that moment on, the journey quietly stops belonging to the passenger and starts belonging to wind, rain, signaling equipment, fallen trees, overhead wires, and whatever else decides to join the meeting. That is where the American highway system starts looking almost unfairly practical. Britain's rail network is dense, heavily used, and in many places physically old. Network Rail manages more than 20,000 miles of track, much of it running through infrastructure built long before anyone imagined today's passenger volumes. When storms bring high winds, flooding, heat, or debris onto the line, disruption can spread across multiple services because trains share fixed corridors. A single damaged section can affect journeys far beyond the original problem, especially when several routes depend on the same junctions or electrical systems. American roads face weather too, sometimes on a much more dramatic scale, but the relationship between weather and mobility is different. The United States has more than 4 million miles of public roads, according to Federal Highway Administration data. That sheer scale creates enormous redundancy. One route may flood, close for snow, or slow to a crawl, while another highway, state road, frontage road, or local bypass keeps traffic moving around the problem. That difference becomes especially visible in states where bad weather is simply part of the calendar. Minnesota does not wait for winter to become convenient. Colorado does not close the concept of transportation because snow showed up. Florida builds daily life around the knowledge that tropical weather exists. State transportation departments deploy snowplows, salt trucks, drainage systems, road crews, electronic signs, and detour networks because the assumption is simple: people still need to move. There's something deeply American about that mindset. The weather is treated less like a reason to surrender, and more like an annoying coworker who has shown up late again, but is still expected to get out of the way. Americans complain about snowplows, construction cones, road salt, and lane closures with the enthusiasm of people who fully expect the system to keep functioning while they complain. That expectation matters. In Britain, bad weather can produce a strange chain reaction because rail passengers depend on the same narrow physical path. Flooding between two stations can suddenly affect people dozens or even hundreds of miles away. The passenger may still be sitting somewhere perfectly dry, yet the journey is already being rewritten by weather they cannot even see. Driving in America often feels more stubborn. If a storm blocks one road, the question quickly becomes which road still works. Navigation apps redraw the route. Highway signs redirect traffic. Drivers adapt almost automatically because the road network gives them room to improvise. The journey may become slower or uglier, but it often remains possible. That ability to keep moving is one of those American conveniences that seems ordinary until you compare it with a system where one broken section can hold an entire timetable hostage. Britain's public transport network deserves credit for moving huge numbers of people through compact cities and between major regions. Yet when weather turns transportation into a test of resilience, America's sprawling road system has an almost stubborn advantage. It was built with enough space, enough alternative routes, and enough everyday expectation that movement should continue. The forecast may say rain, snow, wind, or heat. America usually answers with another lane. Your seat, your rules. There is one transportation luxury Americans rarely brag about because it feels too ordinary to mention. Nobody is breathing 3 inches from your face while you are trying to get home. That sounds like a joke until rush hour begins. Britain's public transport is built to move huge numbers of people through relatively compact cities, and at its best, that density is genuinely impressive. London's Underground alone has carried well over 1 billion passenger journeys in a typical recent year, while major rail corridors funnel commuters into London, Birmingham, Manchester, and other employment centers every morning. Efficiency at that scale requires one basic ingredient: strangers sharing space very closely, and closely can become an unexpectedly intimate word around 5:30 p.m. A crowded platform does not care that somebody had a long day. The train arrives, the doors open, and suddenly personal space is being negotiated with backpacks, winter coats, umbrellas, shopping bags, and one person who somehow decided rush hour was the ideal moment to bring a bicycle. Nobody has done anything wrong. That is simply what high-capacity public transportation looks like when demand peaks. Then America offers a completely different version of commuting, one that can feel almost suspiciously comfortable once people notice what they are getting. According to U.S. Census commuting data, driving remains the dominant way Americans get to work, with the large majority of commuters traveling by private vehicle. That means millions of ordinary journeys happen inside a small personal bubble where the temperature, music, conversation, seat position, and even the smell of the cabin belong to one household rather than an entire carriage. The privacy changes the emotional texture of travel more than transportation debates usually admit. A bad commute inside a car can still involve traffic, construction, or 30 minutes spent studying the rear bumper of the same Ford F-150. Yet there's a strange comfort in being annoyed privately. You can turn up the air conditioning, drink coffee without balancing it against somebody's elbow, call family through Bluetooth, or sit in complete silence after a difficult day. Nobody boards at the next stop, nobody needs your armrest, nobody accidentally turns your shoulder into a pillow because the train took a corner. Americans have turned this little moving room into an extension of home almost without realizing it. Cup holders multiplied, heated seats appeared, phone chargers became expected. Modern vehicles now offer climate zones, sound systems, navigation, storage compartments, and seats comfortable enough that some commuters probably spend more time adjusting lumbar support than choosing office chairs. That is a very different cultural relationship with transportation. On British Rail, the journey is shared, space managed efficiently for everyone. On an American highway, the vehicle becomes private territory, moving through public infrastructure. The road belongs to everybody, but those few square feet around the driver belong completely to the person inside. Once someone gets used to that level of control, it becomes surprisingly difficult to give up. 10 minutes of congestion with your own music and your own temperature can feel very different from 10 minutes standing shoulder to shoulder while waiting for a delayed service. This helps explain why American car culture has survived decades of criticism from abroad. People are not simply attached to engines or asphalt. They are attached to the tiny piece of personal life that travels with them. The freeway may be public, but the commute feels wonderfully private. Traffic tells you here is a strangely modern advantage that rarely gets much credit. American traffic usually has the courtesy to warn you before it ruins your afternoon. Open a navigation app in almost any major US city, and the road ahead is already talking. Red means trouble. Orange means patience. Green means somebody somewhere has clearly left work early. Google Maps, Apple Maps, Waze, electronic highway signs, state transportation feeds, and live incident reports have turned driving into something much more predictable than the old stereotype of simply getting in the car and hoping Interstate 405 behaves itself. That predictability matters because delay feels very different when you can see it coming. The United States has roughly 2 million miles of public roads, while the interstate highway system accounts for just under 50,000 miles of the highest capacity network. Every day, enormous volumes of traffic move through systems monitored by cameras, road sensors, GPS data, and transportation control centers. In cities such as Los Angeles, Dallas, Atlanta, and Houston, congestion is hardly a secret. The interesting part is how much information drivers receive before they reach it. A 20-minute slowdown displayed before departure is annoying, but it is useful annoyance. Dinner can be pushed back. A different route can be chosen. Somebody can leave earlier. The delay has a number attached to it, and once inconvenience has a number, human beings become surprisingly good at making peace with it. Britain's rail passengers do receive extensive live information as well, and modern apps have improved that experience enormously. Yet railway disruption has a different habit. A service may begin with a modest delay, then lose additional time farther down the route, miss its planned connection, change platforms, terminate early, or be canceled altogether. Because each train is tied to tracks, signaling paths, crews, rolling stock, and station capacity, one problem can keep changing shape after the passenger has already committed to the journey. That uncertainty is where frustration multiplies. The difference is almost like choosing between being told that your table at Texas Roadhouse has a 40-minute wait and being told the restaurant will provide an update shortly. 40 minutes is not wonderful, but at least somebody has handed your evening back to you. You can sit down, walk around, call a friend, or mentally prepare yourself for the rolls. American highways increasingly operate on the same principle. Bad news is easier to live with when it arrives early. Electronic message boards warn about crashes several exits ahead. Navigation systems estimate arrival times continuously. Some cities publish real-time lane closures and construction schedules. Even the familiar American roadwork sign, irritating as it may be, is essentially infrastructure saying, yes, we know this is inconvenient, and here is where it starts. That creates a cultural expectation that travel should be measurable. Americans glance at the phone and ask, how long will it take? Rather than simply, is it running? The distinction sounds tiny, yet psychologically, it is enormous. A journey measured in minutes still feels like something you control. A journey waiting for an update feels as though someone else has borrowed your day and forgotten to return it. Britain's rail system remains remarkably useful for moving large numbers of people into dense city centers where private cars could create serious congestion of their own. But when the comparison turns specifically to delay, the American road experience has developed a very persuasive trick. It turns uncertainty into information. That little arrival time glowing on the dashboard may be one of the most underrated comforts in American transportation. Even when the road says 47 minutes, at least the road has given you an answer. Maybe the real difference is not whether Britain has trains and America has highways. It is what each system asks people to surrender when something goes wrong. Time, flexibility, privacy, or control. America's roads are imperfect, but they give ordinary people an extraordinary amount of choice every single day. That freedom is easy to overlook until you compare it. Which system would you trust with your daily life? Tell us below and subscribe for more surprising contrasts from everyday America.